This game is Avatar: The Last Airbender Quest for Balance, the most recent game introduced into the Atla franchise, Atla meaning Avatar: The Last Airbender for short, released on September 22nd of 2023. As the title suggests, I trophy hunted the entirety of this game, chasing all 28 trophies within it. According to PSN profiles, the rough estimate of time needed to gain all the trophies is about 20 hours. However, my playthrough of the game felt like an eternity with some of these trophy requirements and challenges. The biggest crime is the graphics for some of the characters because, oh my god, look at what they did in My Girl Azula. An actual war crime. So, now that you have an idea of the challenge that lies ahead for me, let's begin this trophy hunt journey and understand what it means to be the Avatar. The game begins with an intro cutscene breaking down the story like the show did, launching us directly into the tutorial, giving a brief idea of what the voice lines, gameplay, and combat would be like, especially the budget.
No way!
Oh, that's right. Okay, so he doesn't actually say any of the voice lines. Instead, if it's just like quips like, "What? Oh my god! No!" I made my way through the stage, which earned us our first trophy, Initiate, for completing the tutorial. There, Initiate. First trophy. Finish the tutorial. Chapter 1 begins with our group stuck in a Fire Nation ship trying to find our way out, where it also introduces the element of puzzle solving and fetch quest elements early on in the game. Within each chapter is a bending challenge, which is a puzzle-solving zone that focuses explicitly on bending to solve the problems. Although they are not necessary at the moment, they will become crucial later on in the video. After the bending challenge, we have to complete an animal race, aka bootleg temple run, to progress in the story, which will be tied to a trophy called Gangbuster Gatherer for beating the animal races with 75% or more coins collected. So we'll also be working on that in the background as we progress throughout the story. After searching the ship, we find Aang's lost glider, leading us directly into our first boss fight with Zuko, Prince of the Fire Lord, and with voice dialogue? I think the first trophy was, oh, dialogue!
I am Zuko, son of Ursa and Fire
Ooh,
Lord
dialogue! Despite being easy at first, it becomes more difficult because the game does not provide the context needed for the later boss fights. Once we defeat Zuko, our crew escapes the ship, flying away on Appa, ending Chapter 1. I know I throw out a ton of information at once, but bear with me as it'll make it easier to comprehend the later sections throughout the following chapters. Chapter 2 launches with another animal race, getting the required coins, and arriving at Kyoshi Island, where we get our first dosage of side quests that'll be necessary for a trophy later on. While doing these side quests, we get a trophy called Airlift for launching 20 enemies while using Aang. Okay, Aang is awful at dodging. Okay, Airlift, what was that one? Launch 20 enemies, okay, that's cool. After completing these side quests, we head to the village captain and gain his trust so Sokka can train alongside the Kyoshi warriors. However, the Fire Nation army attacks again, being held off by Sokka and a Kyoshi warrior named Suki. Unfortunately, the bots in this game are not that great as Suki dies almost immediately, leaving Sokka alone with his boomerang to fight off the firebenders. Speaking of his boomerang, we get a trophy called Trusty Boomerang, which requires Sokka's boomerang to do the finishing blow to an enemy. Zuko appears again, following the same pattern as the previous chapter, meaning that the difficulty and tactics are the same as Chapter 1. We defeat him once more, and the game budget begins to show. And what does Aang say after defeating Zuko? Yeah, I just beat up the teenager! Aang feels guilty for the Fire Nation's antics, and leaves Kyoshi Island with his crew, ending Chapter 2. And then Zuko goes, "Urgh!" That's how he knows that he's very mad. Okay. I'm not even a quarter of the way through writing this, and there is simply way too much information to cover for the entirety of the game. So, to combat the narrative aspect, I'll break up the story mode into 2 sections per chapter. The first section will highlight the story's main points, while the second section will highlight only the trophies tied to the chapter. This way it helps follow the game without requiring a novel's worth of storytelling within a single video. And with that explanation, let's head over to Chapter 3. At the start of Chapter 3, Aang and the crew investigate a nearby destroyed town with missing townfolk, trying to find out the source of the issue. We did some more side quests for some of the villagers, eventually finding the source of the problem, a creature named Hey Bai, probably butchering the name of that. After defeating the boss, we discover Hey Bai is actually a spirit of the forest, revealing his true form to be a panda. The spirit returns the missing villagers to the town, ending the chapter. The trophies we got in this chapter were Healing Touch. There we go, Healing Touch. Scroll Call. And They Should Watch Their Step. Which is where we also found out that dying with one character means instant game over. Wait, are we dead?
The world is mine!
If one of you die, the whole thing ends? That is awful. That's stupid. There we go. They should watch their step. Chapter 4 begins with another animal race, and Aang and his friends head to the Fire Nation island to connect with the avatar before him, Avatar Roku, to explain Aang's vision of a comet. We make our way through the island, coming across a door where Roku's spirit resides, but we get stopped by Zuko once more. It has the same boss fight and patterns as before, so it's pretty simple. The chapter concludes with Roku telling our group that the comet in question is Sozin's Comet, which will make the current Fire Lord, Ozai, unstoppable. We actually didn't get any trophies in this chapter, so on to the next one. Chapter 5 starts with Aang alone, as Katara and Sokka come down with the sickness, and it's up to Aang to find a cure. While finding a cure, we switch our perspective to a person named the Blue Spirit, who is working their way through a Fire Nation base, discovering that Aang has been kidnapped. The Blue Spirit rescues Aang from his cell, and as they make their escape, the Blue Spirit's mask breaks, revealing the person to be Zuko all along. In this discovery, Aang saves Zuko from being recognized by the Fire Nation soldiers, giving the cure to Sokka and Katara, ending the chapter. We only get one trophy in this chapter, which was On Your Guard for blocking 20 projectiles with the shield ability. Health down. There we go. On your guard. At the start of Chapter 6, our crew makes their way to the Northern Water Tribe so Aang can learn waterbending. We do some more side quests, and eventually, after some time has passed, we finally learn how to waterbend. During this time, the Fire Nation attacks the Water Tribe, having their Fire Nation army leader held back by a particular firebender. We switch our perspective to Zuko, and he starts to rebel against the leader of the attack, whose name I'm convinced is Jonathan, who was the boss fight of the chapter. We complete the fight, and Aang jumps in and puts an end to Jonathan with the Spirit of the Ocean, while teasing us with a new threat approaching, ending the chapter. Similar to the previous chapter, we only get one trophy, which was Put Out the Fire for defeating Admiral Jonathan. Put out the fire! There we go. Chapter 7 begins with the crew in Omashu trying to find Aang's childhood friend Bumi. It turns out the Fire Nation kidnapped Bumi with control over Omashu and was being held captive by a firebender named Azula. She is the boss fight for this chapter, having the mechanics focus on using waterbending to keep her stunned in place and using the mail carts to stun her. After the boss fight, the chapter ends with us rescuing Bumi and escaping Azula. This chapter also did not have any trophies either, so let's continue on. The Chapter 8 introduces us to Aang's new earthbending teacher, the Blind Bandit, Toph Beifong. We do some side quests around the Beifong Manor and attempt to ask Toph to be our teacher so Aang can learn another element. However, Aang gets kidnapped again, but this time by the boss of the chapter, Jin Fu. Apologies for butchering that name if I did. Toph is left to fight the boss solo, which just involves dodging the boulders and launching them back, and the chapter ends with Toph revealing her talent to her parents and joining Team Avatar to help Aang learn earthbending. We only got one trophy in this chapter, which was That Sounds Right for using Seismic Sense for the first time. Oh, there we go. That sounds right. Alright. The start of Chapter 9 is not so great. Aang loses Appa and they see a Fire Nation drill penetrating the walls of Ba Sing Se. The team make their way inside the drill, destroying as much as they can, made easier with Aang's newly trained earthbending. And we discover that Azula was responsible, initiating another boss fight. Instead of using mail carts, we just use waterbending to freeze her attacks to stun her. We put an end to the drill and save Ba Sing Se from being infiltrated by the Fire Nation, ending the chapter. This section also didn't have any trophies either, so on to the next one. The following chapter begins with the team in Ba Sing Se searching for Appa throughout the city. They are unsuccessful, so we do another animal race and search on a nearby beach for some clues, eventually revealing a hidden pathway underneath the ocean floor. We discover the Dai Li could have Appa, and we find our way underground to our next boss fight against Longfang. We curb stop him before even thinking of capturing Appa, and we discover that Appa was set free, where our crew rejoices and rides off, ending the chapter. There were also no trophies in this section, so moving on. Chapter 11 has the crew make their way to the royal palace to tell the Earth King that the bird is the word, but it's probably more important to mention the corruption within the kingdom. We fight some Dai Li, do some more side quests, eventually making it to the Earth King, where we showcase a twit longer about how the Dai Li do not have a clean history on Discord, exposing Longfang. Again, no trophies from this chapter. The majority of these trophies are either very circumstantial or very tedious to grind towards. The next chapter has us control Aang and Iroh as they escape the Earth Kingdom Palace and try to find Zuko and Katara in the underground cave systems, both kidnapped by the Dai Li. We discover Azula was behind their capture, and Zuko decides to tag team with Azula despite being captured by her. I don't know, he's going through a phase. The boss fight is both Zuko and Azula, so it's nothing too complicated to understand. The chapter ends with Aang receiving back shots from Azula and being out of commission, with Katara carrying Aang out of the cave. We finally achieved some trophies, which were Fire in the Family for playing as both Iroh and Zuko with 2 controllers, and Fire and Lightning Fizzle for defeating the boss. We begin chapter 13 with Team Avatar under disguise in the Fire Fountain City, a domain under the Fire Nation. We do the usual fetch quest throughout the level, and Toph is apparently scamming the local scammers by using her bending as a human lie detector test. Eventually, we find the boss of this chapter, busting Benny. The strategy here is just to time your movements when he shoots his eye lasers and have Aang use his earth bending to stall him in place. The chapter ends with us defeating Busta Rhymes and making our escape to avoid fighting any further. There is one trophy we get here, which is my cabbages for destroying cabbage carts 10 times, which we've been doing in the background of the previous chapters.
My cabbages!
Things are happening in chapter 14 as an army of both water and earthbenders plan to attack the Fire Nation capital during a solar eclipse, as firebenders can't bend during this time. After fighting some fire soldiers, we do another animal race and make our way underground trying to find the Fire Lord Ozai. Instead, we find more Dai Li, so we obviously have to put them back in their place. We find Azula instead, bringing us into a boss fight where she uses the Dai Li to do all the fighting for her. After slapping the Dai Li, we go to capture Azula, however the solar eclipse ends, meaning everyone's firebending is back, Azula escapes, and we miss our chance to stop the war, ending the chapter. We do get 2 more trophies here, which were a Gangbuster Gatherer, which I mentioned early in the video, for completing those animal races with the majority of coins collected.
We made it, buddy!
There we go, Gangbuster Gatherer. And gotta touch them all for interacting with 20 different objects in the game by using bending. Chapter 15 has Team Avatar in the Western Air Temple, retreating after failing the raid on the Fire Nation. The temple is left in a mess, leaving us to do some puzzles, do a little bit of side quests, and clean up the place after it was left unattended to for a century. Although the temple is safe at first, the boss for chapter 13 reappears, Mensho is a real dickhead by destroying the air temple with his laser eye. We're able to beat the boss by having Sokka use his boomerang to bop him straight in the eye. The chapter ends with Breaking Bus defeated and Zuko beginning his redemption arc by wanting to train Aang how to firebend to fight against his father. Oh yeah, and Zuko was also responsible for sending Mr. Busbastic at Aang. We start chapter 16 by planning a prison break, helping those captured by the Fire Nation who were responsible for the attempted raid of the Fire Nation capital. We find Suki, break her out of her cell, and rile up the prisoners to fight each other as a distraction. They find the warden's office, open up the cells, and it's boss fight time with Azula and Ty Lee. This boss fight is horrendous. The lack of direction I mentioned at the start of the video rears its ugly head here. I was running around for an actual 15 minutes trying to figure out how to deal damage to the boss. You can see just by the video being sped up, I have no idea what they want me to do, and because I can't do any damage to the boss, I was taking free damage, which made me die on my first attempt, having to go back and play it again. But as it turns out, you have to use Sokka's boomerang to do any damage to stun, and I find this out in the 13-minute mark after running around doing nothing because the game gives you no direction about how to fight the boss. The music's okay, but after hearing the same music for 13 to 15 uninterrupted minutes, you begin to lose your mind, and you see that the second that we beat this boss. You, Azula, you stupid mother... You.
I warn you, but did you listen?
You weren't listening! Unfortunately, Azula is a sore loser and exfils, but we do manage to save the prisoners from their capture. Ty, on the other hand, is just happy to be there, so she gets a pass. Here we go. Chapter 17 is when things are about to go down. Aang disappears alone, honing his newly learned firebending to train his mental fortitude for the upcoming battle. He resorts to finding a small island to train his avatar state while the others are preparing for war. We switch our perspective to Bumi and Iroh fighting the fire soldiers in Ba Sing Se, attempting to free as many prisoners as possible. The chapter concludes with Bumi and Iroh forcing the Fire Nation soldiers to surrender, with Ba Sing Se back under control. There were 2 trophies we got, which were Bending Master for learning all 4 elements, and the gangs all here for unlocking every character in the game. The gang's all here. This is it, the final chapter, Chapter 18. While Aang is off completing the last of his training, Toph, Suki, and Sokka make their way inside a Fire Nation ship to destroy the steering, but not without resistance from the soldiers. They successfully attacked the ship and prevented the fleet of other ships from reaching Aang. Meanwhile, Zuko and Katara run into a boss fight with Azula, who is infuriated that she doesn't get a Fortnite skin, but Zuko does. It's absolutely abysmal. Hi there, post-editing plot here. So it already turns out that they confirmed the Avatar skin, so it's technically not a leak anymore, so I legally cannot be sued by Epic Games. I think. The boss fight can be handled in 2 different ways, either using Zuko's fire, timing the attacks for when she stops her attacks, or you can play as Katara, timing her attacks by freezing her in place to stun her. After defeating the non-Fortnite skin, we skip to Aang fighting the big bad of the game, the Fire Lord Ozai. I hate this boss fight. I cannot express my hatred for this boss fight enough. The boss fight is designed into 4 sections. The first section has you parkour to different mountain cliffs and deal damage to Ozai after his fire wheel attack. By the way, the fight doesn't work with the awful camera movement. The second section has us chuck some boulders at Ozai to knock him out of the air. This wasn't as bad, but not as bad as the camera angle. The third section has us hide from Ozai's fire and attack, waiting for him to use his lightning bending so we could redirect it back at him. The fourth and final section is basically an instant win as Aang enters the Avatar state immune to any damage, making him quite literally... You probably thought I was gonna say it. I don't want any flack for that joke, alright? Invincible Season 2 just finished it. It's heat. Watch it if you haven't. The chapter ends with us defeating the Fire Lord and removing his bending. Zuko takes position of Fire Lord, and the nations are free from the threat of the Fire Nation, ending the 100-year war. There were 2 trophies we got here, which are the Fire Lord is finished, self-explanatory,
No, you can't.
and your journey's end for completing the entire story mode. Your journey ends. Beat the story mode. And that completes the campaign for the story. There were some missable trophies we didn't get in our initial playthrough, so here's our short compilation of some of the miscellaneous trophies we returned to get.
Fire Nation as my prisoner. No, strong enough.
There we go. There we go, beat all quests.
No, I better watch out.
Now there's one particular trophy in this game that I despise out of any of the trophies we've gotten thus far, and that trophy's name is called Master Treasure Hunter, which you get for opening all chests throughout the game. It sounds simple at first, but no, it's not. Each chapter has a percentage of how many collectibles and quests you found on each map. However, the chest percentage doesn't apply, as you can literally have 100% on every chapter and not have the trophy appear. I had to go through the free mode, which you unlock after completing each chapter, completing the entire game 2 additional times again. Oh yeah, and the chests are hidden stupidly well. The free mode footage I have on my first run through alone of trying to find these chests while doing those miscellaneous trophies earlier totals out to 5 hours, 25 minutes, and 58 seconds of just that run. So I had to go through the game for a second run in free mode to find the chest, since I literally couldn't find it in my first playthrough. And remember earlier in the video when I brought up those bending challenges that you could see in each chapter? Well, that's where the last chest would be hiding, out of sight in the corner of the map, even though the chapter was at 100% and all the bending challenges were already completed. Once I found this lone chest, you could hear my relief at finally getting this stupid trophy. We have finally found another chest. I think we're in chapter 15? No, 14. We're in chapter 14, and this is the only other chest that I found. So, let's see. Yes! Master Treasure Hunter. This f***ing trophy. This trophy sucks. With most of the trophies completed, we can move on to the game's next mode called Spear Trials. Now, Spear Trials consist of doing these random challenges such as surviving for a set amount of time, protecting a person until time runs out, finishing a race with all coins, killing a boss without getting hit, etc. There are about 35 of these missions, and while some are easier than most, the remaining ones were an absolute pain. I'm convinced there was no testing for some of these trials, as they were either way too tricky due to the game mechanics or how the bots were programmed. So here's a brief montage of me going through completing all 35 of these trials.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
There it is. We call that a challenge. Beat all of the spear trials. Nice, nice, nice. By completing these trials, we unlocked 2 trophies, which were You Call That a Challenge for completing all trials, and Positively Perky for unlocking all character perks. Please? There it is. Positively Perky. Unlock all character perks, which means we have 1 trophy left. And that one final trophy I saved for the very last is called Pumped Up Punishment, which you achieve by defeating a boss with Aang when all scrolls and bending moves are maxed out. And what better boss than the Fire Lord himself? It's the perfect trophy to end on that feels the closest canonically to the game compared to the show. This trophy is essentially post-endgame, meaning that this particular trophy would be the last for the majority of people as well. So, let's beat him up again and end this absolute bore of a platinum trophy for good. There we go. And here comes the achievement for the platinum. The Avatar stage. Let's see what that looks like real quick, by the way. Now Aang is really mad. There we go. I mean, this truly... this goddamn game. And there you have it. The Platinum Trophy for Avatar The Last Airbender Quest for Balance has been acquired. The game was upsetting to play from start to finish, and it's sad to see the treatment of the Avatar franchise received in this way. The gameplay was horrendous, the music was very repetitive, and the voice lines were non-existent, instead replaced with baseless expressions and grunts. While the trophies were okay for the most part, the Master Treasure Hunter trophy is an awful way to design your trophies. I would give this game a 2 out of 10. Even as a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, this game simply ruins Avatar for me. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This video took quite a while to make, but I'm happy with the end results. If you would like to see more of this type of content on the channel, please feel free to let me know down below. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.